Echo of a Broken Mirror, Part 1, Ashes and Memories. Smoke, thick and acrid, still swirled over the charred remains of the house. The fire, fierce and merciless, had consumed everything. Furniture, photographs, memories, everything but ashes and grief. Sarah stood wrapped in a thin blanket provided by her neighbors, looking at what was left of her life. Her hands shook, tears streamed down her cheeks. There was a gaping emptiness inside, so big that it seemed she would fall into it at any moment. The house where she had grown up, where she had loved and laughed, where her daughter Lily had taken her first steps, was now just a blackened husk. All of this, in an instant, without warning. The fire had started in the night. Sarah was fast asleep when she smelled the smoke. She jumped up, ran out of the bedroom, and saw the fire devouring the living room. Lilia! Where was Lilia? A scream, hoarse and full of horror, burst from her throat. She rushed to Lilia's room, but the flames were already blocking her way. She tried, fought the fire, called for her daughter, but it was useless. The door was locked, and the flames licked her hands. The firefighters arrived quickly, but it was too late. The fire left no chance. Sarah remembered only fragments, sirens, fuss, words of comfort that meant nothing. Everything was like a fog. Her life seemed to have turned upside down. Everything most precious was destroyed. She turned to her husband, Daniel, who was standing next to her, hugging her shoulders. He was pale. His eyes were red from crying. He had lost not only his home, but also his only daughter. This can't be true, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel clenched his teeth, holding back sobs. He didn't answer. Words were meaningless. Part 2, Silence and Pain. After Lilia's funeral, Sarah and Daniel's lives became an endless series of empty days. The silence in the house was deafening. Their home, which had seemed so warm and cozy, was now full of cold, silent despair. They avoided each other. They couldn't talk, couldn't look each other in the eyes. The pain was too strong to share. Sarah blamed herself. She should have woken up earlier. She should have saved Lilia. Every morning she woke up with this feeling of guilt, with this weight on her heart that pressed harder and harder. Daniel blamed her too. He didn't say it directly, but Sarah felt his condemnation, his hidden anger. He couldn't forgive her for losing her daughter. They walked around the house like ghosts. They ate in silence, slept in separate rooms, avoided all contact. The love that had once bound them together had turned to ashes. One evening, Sarah found Daniel sitting in the living room, where the tree he and Lilia had decorated for Christmas had once stood. He was looking at a photograph of Lilia, who had miraculously survived the fire. "I don't know how to live," he said, his voice hoarse. Sarah walked over to him and sat down next to him. She wanted to hug him, to comfort him, but she couldn't. Her arms were clenched with fear and pain. "I don't know either," she answered, her voice trembling. They sat in silence, looking at the photograph of their daughter. At that moment, they were as far apart as they had ever been. Their shared grief seemed to only increase the distance between them. Part 3, Shadow of the Past. To somehow distract herself from the pain, Sarah began to sort through the things that she managed to save from the house. She found Lilia's old diary. She sat down on the floor and opened the diary. The pages were covered in neat handwriting, full of childish drawings and naive notes. Sarah read them, tears streaming down her cheeks. She relived her daughter's childhood, remembered her laughter, her hugs, her first steps. The diary contained notes about how Lilia loved her parents, how she dreamed of the future, how she enjoyed every day. Sarah realized that she had to do something. She could not let the grief consume her. She had to find a way to live on. She had to remember Lilia, live for her. She decided to go back to work. She was an artist, and drawing always helped her cope with difficulties. She began painting portraits of Lilia, trying to capture her image on canvas. Daniel watched her from the side. He saw how Sarah immersed herself in her work, how she tried to find solace in her art. He understood that she did it not only for herself, but for him as well. Part 4, The Broken Mirror. One evening, Sarah came into Daniel's room. He was sitting on his bed, leafing through an old photo album. I know it's hard for us, Sarah said, sitting down next to him, but we can't go on like this. We have to try to find each other. Daniel was silent. He did not look up from the photographs. I know you're angry with me, Sarah continued. You blame me for Lilia's death. But I blame myself too. I suffer too. Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes were full of anger. You? Are you suffering? Eng, he shouted. You killed our daughter. You were asleep when she died in the fire. You must suffer forever. Daniel's words, like shards of a broken mirror, pierced Sarah's heart. She fell silent, shocked. I tried, she whispered. You didn't try, she protested. Daniel, you just watched it all fall apart. How can I forgive you? Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks again. She realized that Daniel would never be able to forgive her. Their love was broken, like this mirror. She stood up and left the room, feeling her heart breaking into pieces. She knew that their marriage was doomed. Part 5. New Light from Ashes. Sarah moved to a small apartment in another part of the city. She took with her everything that reminded her of Lilia, her diary, photographs, drawings. She continued to draw portraits of her daughter. She put them up for sale, and people bought them. Many buyers said that they felt warmth and light in these portraits, despite the tragic subject matter. Sarah realized that her art could bring joy and comfort to people. She decided to open an art studio where she would teach children to draw. One day, a woman came to her with a little girl who had also lost her parents in a fire. Sarah looked at the girl, and it seemed to her that she saw her Lilia in her. She began to work with this girl, helping her express her feelings through art. She realized that this was her calling, that this was her way to live. She kept thinking about Daniel. It hurt her, but she understood that their relationship was destroyed forever. She knew that she had to move on, to find a new light in her life. One day while she was working in her studio, Daniel called her. She did not expect it. Sarah, I wanted to say that, I'm sorry, he said, his voice shaking. Sarah was silent. She did not know what to say. I know I was wrong, Daniel continued. I blamed you, but really I blame myself. I miss Lilia so much. Me too, Sarah answered, her voice quiet. I wanted to ask, can I come over? Daniel asked. Sarah thought for a moment. She knew that their relationship would never be the same, but she also understood that they needed to try to find each other again, if only for the sake of Lilia's memory. Yes, come over, she said. Part 6. Echoes of Hope. Daniel came to Sarah that same evening. They sat in her small apartment, remembering Lilia, their home, their past life. They cried, they laughed, they shared their memories. They talked about their pain, their love, their hopes. Sarah realized that Daniel still loved her, that he still needed her. Daniel realized that Sarah still loved him, that she still wanted to be with him. They decided to try to start over. They decided to forget about the past, about the guilt and the pain. They decided to live for Lilia, for the memory of her. They started dating again, going to the movies, walking the streets of the city. They tried to find joy in the little things, to appreciate every day, every minute spent together. One day, Sarah and Daniel came to old Mr. Fielding's bookshop. They were looking for a book that would help them keep the memory of Lilia alive. Mr. Fielding, already very old, greeted them warmly. He heard their story and recommended them a book of poems by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. There is a lot of love in these poems, a lot of pain, a lot of hope, he said. They will help you get through your tragedy. Sarah and Daniel bought the book and went home. In the evening, they sat on the sofa and began to read Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poems out loud. Their voices merged together. Their tears rolled down their cheeks. They felt that Lilia was next to them, that she heard them, that she loved them. In the silence of the apartment, amid the smell of old books and new hopes, the echo of the broken mirror gradually died down, giving way to light and new beginnings. Their love, like a phoenix, was reborn from the ashes.